Sidekicks, the weekly cybersecurity podcast hosted by Richmond Advisory Group's principal analysts, that's namely me, Rory Duncan.
And me, Christina Richmond. This podcast is your go-to partner for understanding the cybersecurity market, industry trends, and the real-world challenges of protecting organizations today. Hey, Rory, how are you?
Hey, Christina. Yeah, I'm good, actually. Thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, I'm quite well, thank you. I mean, isn't this remarkable? We're both well. We're not coughing. We don't have some crazy little plague that has gone through a conference. And here we are.
Yep.
We're well.
Excellent. I think there's lessons to learn from that.
Really? Don't go to conferences?
That's right.
On that note.
Yeah, on that note. Well, yes, let's see what happens in the next few days. But yeah, I think that's the issue, right? If you want to be disease-free or infection-free, don't see or meet anybody else in the world. But then, of course, when you do, because you're going to have to, you'll get everything, probably.
You'll get everything. Yeah, it's kind of like when you have little kids and they go to preschool and they bring everything home. Yeah. And then after a while, when you're in the school age with your kids, you don't get most things because you're kind of immune at that point.
Yeah. I do remember our kids when they went off to college. They'd go off, and after about 2 weeks, they would be terribly ill every single year. They called it freshers flu. So freshers being the first year and the first couple of weeks of special activities they do. So Christina, let's just do a few bits and pieces just to kick things off. We do have a great guest coming up later in the show, but what do we have to talk about? Yeah, the newsletter. Why don't you give us an update on the newsletter?
Yeah, it's called Noisy and No Signals. Oh, no, it's called Signal, not Noise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you sign up, we'll send you a nice little 4-page extract from our syndicated study on AI being used in security. It looks at how prepared CISOs are, what kind of threats they're worried about, the C-suite and IT practitioners. What do they think about it? And, how prepared are they? What's their budget? All kinds of little things like that. So we're starting to do the readouts for our syndicated clients. Mm-hmm. And if you're a syndicated client, Rory, which is pretty cool, you get data points.
Ooh.
So something I've never seen in the industry, the analyst industry, Richmond Advisory Group actually provides data points from these syndicated surveys to our syndicated clients to use in marketing or sales or lots of different things. Yeah,
good.
I think it's very unique. Yeah. And I've sent the first batch out. So I haven't heard back, but maybe they're just going, oh my gosh, this is a lot of gold. What do we do with it? I hope.
Yeah.
I agree. So yeah, you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I agree. It's really interesting stuff. The point about surveys is you can either kind of just dwell at the data level, or you can do something with it and see what kind of insights you get. And of course, that's what we enjoy doing, which is taking that data and turning it into a story.
That's right.
And
that's right.
And before we move on, just to say, I quite liked your your alt newsletter title, Noisy, No Signal. That was good. See, that's the AI created version of the newsletter. Just a lot of random things that don't make sense and probably are made up.
Speaking of AI, I have something to tell you. Hang on one second here.
Sure.
I got an email about our AI generated podcast.
Did you?
So first of all, yeah, I did. So this person, and I'll not name them, she says, I was just catching up on your podcast and the intro of yesterday's drop has me cracking up in all caps. And that was the sluggo.
Oh, right.
Drunk Scotsman in the Garden episode.
Right.
And then, of course, we had a brilliant guest, Kane McGladrey.
Mm-hmm.
But then she said, and last week's AI podcast takeover was so neat. Mm-hmm. The intro where the AI hosts say, the names that keep coming up are Christina and Rory when summarizing Richmond Advisory Group is actually a hilarious mimic of podcasting.
Yeah.
We won't do it often, folks,
No,
but I thought that was great. All right.
fine.
Well, listen, other things that we're going to be talking about in this episode. In the news section, which we'll get to in a moment, big news,
Oh yeah,
LevelBlue acquiring Trustwave. Two OGs coming together. So
yeah.
we'll talk about that. Black Hat, those who are going to Black Hat, give us a jingle. We're not 100% sold on going. So the
Mm,
more who call us and say you must come, the more we'll really think about it.
yeah. Yeah, let's do the news, Christina, and a big story of the week, and that's over to you.
So, we wrote a blog a week or two ago that LevelBlue was buying Aon's cybersecurity consulting business, which is the old Strauss Friedberg incident readiness and response capabilities, and Elysium,
Mm-hmm.
their capabilities as well. And now, 2 weeks later, LevelBlue announced Tuesday, I think, that it's acquiring Trustwave. So what I said earlier in the show is two OGs coming
Yeah,
together, right?
it's quite the deal.
It's quite the deal. We don't know the monetary side of it because it's unstated. So here's the gist. So LevelBlue spun out of AT&T, had been a leader on quadrants and marketscapes and waves for many, many years in MSS. Trustwave, old PCI security capabilities and services, and became a leader in MSS over the years, and then was sold to Singtel, telco out of Asia, and then was divested from Singtel, and then was with Chertoff Group, and now is being acquired by LevelBlue. So these two OGs coming together, and when I said in the blog that was posted yesterday, two leaders coming together, or I think I also gave them a quote for their press release that says
Mm-hmm.
that. That's what I mean, because when these folks have been on, the MQ, the waves, the scapes, all the different studies for years, you have to kind of stand up and take notice. But there's a couple of reasons that you need to take notice. It's not just that they're OG leaders. Where are they today? And I think, one has to be cautious about believing everything that is stated.
Mm-hmm.
And I did put in the blog that they are stating a combined revenue of $1 billion and 30,000 plus customers and 2,000 employees. I think it's good to enhance your size and make the coming together look as large and strong as possible. I don't know the figures behind that, and that's why I used the word stated. So I wish them well bringing all of that together. It is a significant play if the execution comes off without a hitch, right? As everything
Yep.
goes.
It's all in the execution.
Well, that's exactly right, Rory. And so, what we've seen over our 20 years each in this studying the market is that when consolidation is happening, you see these kinds of mergers, and we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing a lot of that. I think you said there were 41
Yeah,
M&A deals in cyber just in
just
June.
in June. Yeah, and that was from it wasn't just me randomly picking a number. That was in Security Week in the last couple of days. 41. Some of them are quite small, or at least we don't know the exact financial transaction value, but they were small companies, ergo probably small deals.
Right,
But yeah, Christina, 41.
right. 41. So consolidation is continuing. When you see consolidation in any industry, like the PC industry, how many PC manufacturers do we have now? 8, you
Mm,
know? And we used to have 40
yeah.
or 100 back
Hmm.
in the 80s. And so when you see this consolidation happening, it means that the market has moved on to some new next gen capabilities. Terrific. But it also signals maturation and a dying off of some of the OGs. And
Yeah.
so dying off is maybe a harsh way to put it. I see the LevelBlue acquisition of Trustwave as a little bit of both, the sloughing off and the combining of the old guard into one new. So
Hmm.
that's LevelBlue. It used to be AT&T, then it became LevelBlue, and then Trustwave in and out of its acquisition now with LevelBlue. So it's a sloughing off, it's a combining and maturation.
Yeah.
But something can really come out of it. And so take, for example, Accuvant and Fishnet a million years ago. I used to study both those companies, and then they came together and they had this funny new name, Optiv.
Right.
And I thought, oh dear, it's just not going to work. And there were bumps and bruises for a while, but ultimately they did emerge as a very strong product and services solution provider. And they've also had their history of in and out of different owners and investors. So I think there's a possibility here, and I'm excited for LevelBlue because there was a bit of a yawner for about a year. We didn't hear much,
Yeah.
and they did go through some kind of cleaning ranks a bit, and so did Trustwave. And so I get excited when two of my favorite children, two OGs, are coming together to create something new. So what do they bring together? LevelBlue has the old Alien Vault USM AI-driven detection, and Trustwave has threat intelligence through Spider Labs, and it is quite slick. Spider Labs is really an interesting, long-time threat intelligence set of capabilities. They also have incident response expertise, so that together with the Aon Strauss-Friedberg acquisition is going to be pretty interesting. Again, as integration is successfully executed, and then it'll enable a broader global footprint. So those things are going to be nice. The other thing that LevelBlue gets out of this is the government piece. Trustwave is, well, they say they are the MDR provider that has gotten FedRAMP. I can't corroborate that because I just don't know if others have it or not, but certainly one of the MDR providers that has FedRAMP and state ramp. So that's going to help LevelBlue in the government space. And then this is also a trend towards platforms, right? That's the continuing trend. So Fusion from Trustwave is going to combine with the USM platform from Alien Vault. And, again, execution of integration has to happen appropriately. Yeah. Anything to add there? I don't want to take too much time on it, but I think it's a really big deal, potentially. And it should have others quaking in their boots a little bit. What do you think?
No, definitely. There comes a point where some companies cease to exist, others become part of something that is then bought by another company and then bought by another one. In this case, with LevelBlue and Trustwave, if you were to look at all the different companies under the hood, it's kind of like a big funnel, has filtered them all down to these two companies, now down to one. I think transition is a word that definitely comes to mind. The industry is potentially transitioning in the same way that, let's say, the cloud industry is arguably transitioning to a new phase where you've got infrastructure as a commodity, highly virtualized, larger number of big players controlling the vast majority of that virtualized infrastructure. Is the same thing potentially going to happen in cybersecurity? We have a large number of players doing that,
Yeah, I mean, so what's fascinating, Rory, in the 20 years I've been studying cyber, it doesn't always have the same trajectory. I mean, maybe it ultimately will. I mean, one of the things that I'm hopeful of is a platform security play that really does do everything. But is it in my lifetime? And cybersecurity is hard, and it's always a moving target. And there's always new capabilities that we're behind in. So just think Gen AI. Oops, we didn't secure that. And then agents. Oh my gosh, how are we going to secure agentic AI? And, back in the day, it was next-gen firewalls trying to catch up with lots of different things that we were seeing as the perimeter broke down. I don't know if it'll be on that traditional trajectory of finally ending up with the two hugest companies or the five hugest companies doing platform security. But it sure is fascinating to watch. And at the same time, the flip side of us being behind and always trying to secure the new technology is that there's so much money in VC for these new startups. And while there was a bit of a pause for a little while a year ago in VC money, it's back. We are seeing just the proliferation of new ideas, and that's good and bad, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think if money is certainly being thrown at many companies. I think the challenge where it comes to AI and agentic AI is we still don't quite know what these things are and what the end result is going to be. Some are arguing that this may well be a kind of a sunk cost fallacy. So much money's already gone in they have to throw money at it even more just to make it work. Otherwise, it's going to be the next bubble. But yeah,
There you go.
that's really interesting. Another massive acquisition.
Well, and 2 acquisitions in the span of, a month time frame. And, that also signals some big moves at the Will Jam Ventures VC, run by Bob McCullen, ex Trustwave. So there's a tangled web there to unpack, which we won't do, but please read the blog because we kind of unpack it a little bit more. Hey, you've got some interesting news. Ukraine joining the EU Cybersecurity Reserve. Tell us about that.
Yeah, thanks. So, and I know for many of the folk listening to this might think Ukraine, it's somewhere over there, especially if you're in the US. And of course, depending on which side of the fence you're on, the administration will have a different view on things. But clearly, from my perspective, sitting here in the UK, my neighbor's father is Ukrainian. The guys that came to paint our house had basically fled from Odessa and were trying to set up shop as a business over here. So, Ukraine is there. As war has progressed, modern warfare has become much more prevalent in the cyber realm in terms of tools and resources that are used. Nation states using cyber tools as weapons as opposed to the purely physical side of warfare and armies. We know all this, but it's just to kind of put it in context. So the good news is that the European Union has agreed that Ukraine will be able to access the European Union's cybersecurity reserve. And the reserve basically includes a network of certified EU cybersecurity experts that will step in when a member country is under some kind of nation state attack like this. Will help them stop the attacks, give them advice on how to protect information, restore systems operations, mitigate against future attacks. So that's all good because a country like Ukraine needs that kind of help. And for those of you who think, well, Ukraine surely is, a more of a primitive country and not as advanced as others, they're actually quite far advanced from a technology perspective. And
are they?
They are indeed. And the Ukraine's Minister of Digital Transformation, they have a Minister of Digital Transformation. I don't know other companies that have that. So he said, we're getting around about 100,000 logged cyber attacks every month that they know about. 100,000. And the vast majority of those are against their government information systems, their power grids, and other facilities. So not only do they have to contend with physical attacks on that critical infrastructure, they also have to deal with the cyber attacks as well. So I think that's important, the fact that they have that resource. Perhaps that will help them at least resist. Perhaps that will get them to a situation where they're in a better negotiating position, and we'll see what happens.
That is fascinating, actually. And, there is an impact on the U.S. So we like to stay in our stall, as you've seen, the U.S. it's like the old maps they would show of New York to California, and there was nothing in between. New Yorkers are snobby and think that there's nothing until California, and Californians kind of look back and go, well, there's nothing until there's New York. And Americans can be quite parochial in that way and not think about Europe and not think about Asia. But Ukraine really has a day-to-day impact on us budgetarily, because of the military spend, politically, geopolitically, because of the interaction with Ukraine's president, Zelensky, and our president, Trump, and how Ukraine then works with the rest of Europe does impact, potentially a diminishing relationship with the U.S. And so again, I'm skirting the politics, trying to behave, right? But so it does have an impact. And so the fact that they're getting 100,000 cyber attacks every month, that's over 1 million in a year. And they're getting this assistance by joining the EU's cybersecurity reserve means that they're more fully embedded into the European Union than they had been on many, many levels. And so good for them. Interesting from the U.S. perspective that it diminishes our relationship even just a titch more, if you will.
Yeah. I had another story,
which
is by way of complete contrast. Well, not complete contrast, but at least from a geographic perspective. And this was a report into the danger of Chinese fake e-commerce websites that have been popping up during Latin America's Hot Sale 2025. Now,
what is that?
Yes, indeed. It's not what you think it is. Hot Sale Hot Sale 2025. It's like, at least for the South American countries, it's like what we would have as a Black Friday or Cyber Monday type event, right?
Okay. Yeah, I know. I went to the wrong place with Hot Sale 2025. Thank you for putting me on the right path.
Don't Google that. Just
no.
Saying. So basically what's happening is, as South Americans have kind of accelerated the volume of e-commerce and things, which is good for the region, right? We're seeing some either nation-state actors or groups operating from within other nation-states trying to take advantage of that. So what you have is websites appearing that have been mimicking Apple, Wrangler jeans, but also payment services like MasterCard and PayPal. Now, you might think, well, isn't it easy to spot the ones that are fake? How necessarily you can do that? The average purchaser may not know the difference, may not be able to say, well, does it have an HTTPS, and what's the IP address, and blah blah blah. Most people wouldn't necessarily look at that. But what's happening then is this huge malware operation in China that is weaponizing thousands of these branded storefronts that look very real to harvest payment credentials. So what I thought was great was it was only picked up because this Mexican journalist by the name of Ignacio Gomez Villaseñor, I hope I got his name right, good for him. He had been doing some work on monitoring suspicious domains, and he noticed they were being hosted on a single IP, which is a little bit odd, right? So he alerted authorities, and they found that it was kind of endemic during that time, and a lot of this is just happening under the hood, and people wouldn't necessarily know they're being scammed until, lo and behold, things that they bought just don't appear, or there's no record of them on the legit websites. So that was something that I thought would be interesting to bring to attention, but it kind of reflects the fact that these markets in South America are developing quite rapidly. E-commerce, which perhaps 4 or 5 years ago wasn't quite the same kind of business as it is now, has developed quite rapidly, which is good from an e-commerce perspective. But clearly when that happens, it draws in these bad actors who try to exploit people's interest in getting a good deal on something.
Yeah, wow, that's fascinating. So I'm glad that you've brought that forward to us. And for those who may be listening from Latin America, be careful during your, sale season, sort of similar to the Black Friday, Cyber Monday that we have here in North America.
So this week's special guest is Tim Erlin, the VP of Product at Wallarm. Hey, Tim. Thanks for being a guest on the show, and also thanks for being a fellow philosophical Capricorn. And that's because
thank you for having me.
I looked at your bio. So 19th of January, I think it was, is your birthday. Is that right?
That's true, yes.
Yeah,
that's right.
I'm only a few days before you. And also you majored in philosophy.
I did. I actually I had a double major, although I don't know if I put both of those in LinkedIn. It was philosophy, and the other one was Hispanic and Continental European Literature, which I love because it is a representation of the disagreement between the languages and literatures department and the English department, which wouldn't let the other department teach any British authors. So they had to call it Continental European Literature. I always find that funny.
That is hilarious. Gosh, well, you're probably better learned than I am in terms of continental literature, that's for sure. They didn't really teach that when I was at school.
Well, and it also speaks to how we come to cybersecurity. I mean, Tim, my education was French literature and history. Those were my degrees. And so philosophy and literature and history brings us to this fascinating industry called cybersecurity. And I'm sure we each have our meandering way of getting here. But for me, cybersecurity is one of the most interesting things to study. And
It,
so I hats off to you.
I
You had a
was I
meandering
found
way
that
of getting there.
I found that I was not alone in being a philosophy major who ended up in cybersecurity. I
Yeah,
think it was something about the timing of the industry developing and becoming a sort of a real thing, and that at least for philosophy in particular, I think there's definitely a group of people who found both information technology and information security attractive because they're you leverage your critical thinking skills, but they're problems you can actually solve, unlike
yeah.
many of the problems in philosophy.
Well, can you though? I
Well,
mean,
yeah, I
can we
suppose
solve? Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a fair
it's a
word,
good
but
point. I'm still
so
employed
still,
in cybersecurity with many of the same problems. That's an excellent point.
yeah, exactly. So to that point, what keeps you up at night, Tim? What's going on? What's troubling you in the cyber sphere?
Well, I mean, I don't want to be trite, but I think AI is the answer these days
Yeah.
in terms of what keeps me up at night. It's hard for it not to be, and there are so many
hmm
different aspects to touch on there, but on some level, that's what's keeping me up at night these days.
Well, and so what specifically? I know that Wallarm covers a lot in the API security market, but what specifically is challenging? I mean, that's really a dumb question. What specifically in AI is challenging around cybersecurity? But really, there are specifics that you and I have chatted about before that I think are terrifying. And I have to call out the
Hmm.
wonderful report that you guys have done called the API Threat Stats Report, The Rise of Agentic AI. And Rory and I were just chatting about the cover,
Hmm.
a
Yeah,
scary
it was a
robot.
bit
And what
Oh,
were
with
you
the
bit
saying,
robot.
scary.
Rory?
But
Apart
there's
from
there's one of a there's one image of a very comforting robot in a sweater holding a hot beverage, a cup of
I
tea or
love
coffee.
that image.
That's my
Yes,
favorite.
hmm
that's my favorite too. But
Yeah.
Rory, right after that, that was API vulnerability trends, and there's this,
hmm
a robot in a cardigan with his coffee mug or its coffee mug, and then what were you saying, Rory? Page 10 or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, no, we were just commenting. I know it's maybe not um, the most interesting commentary about the report, but it has a really interesting look to it. Kind of a
hmm
NVIDIA kind of industrial, kind of edgy look to it. I found it quite attractive actually.
It's a
Well,
quite nicely done, yeah,
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
nicely done
now I have a
report.
good reason to share this podcast with the designer who came up with all that imagery. He did a great job.
Oh, did he? Ah, excellent.
Well, so AI is keeping you up at night, and then you have
Yeah.
this report. So I'm guessing there's some connection between agentic AI and and what Wallarm does. And we're really just here to educate our listeners on what they should be worried about. And if it's worrying you, then they should
Yeah.
probably worry about it too. So tell us more.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the connection between maybe the evolution from generative AI to agentic AI, and then the connection between agentic AI and APIs, because I think that's kind of the
hmm
the arc that generates concern for me. So, we've had this sort of revolution of generative AI where you have tools like, Claude and ChatGPT and things like that are great at producing something, an image or text. And, sure, there are some downsides, occasional hallucinations. They're not perfect. But if you go back just 5 years and think about how much we've progressed in terms of that technology, it really is astounding. Now,
hmm
agentic AI takes that one step further, taking the same, conceptually the same things, those large language models, and giving them the ability to take action. And so when we talk about the benefits, it's things like change a dinner reservation, purchase a flight for you. Visa
hmm
has this whole initiative called intelligent commerce or intelligent e-commerce, which is all about giving the ability to agents to make payments for you, and
Oh
that's
dear.
potentially quite powerful, all of those things. But it also means that those agents, these autonomous LLMs, if you will, now have the ability to connect to lots of different systems in ways that are not necessarily always predictable. And so, what I'm looking at and what generates concern for me is the massive explosion of APIs, because all of
Hmm.
those agents are connecting to APIs to take those actions and potentially connecting to other agents who then connect to other APIs. It has this sort of exponential growth problem. So they're all connecting to these APIs to take actions, but we really have a very thin understanding of the potential for unexpected emergent behavior among these agents and the lack of guardrails around their behavior. Um, LLMs can be
And
creative in how they solve problems, and that's what I worry about.
so can we even see what they're going off and creating on our behalf? And especially if there is this sort of exponential exponential creativity that they have. Do we see each of the steps of what they are creating? Do we even have visibility, is my question.
We don't today. We probably
Right.
should. It, often with, I mean, even I was going to say with cybersecurity, there's this pattern where anytime a substantial new technology is introduced, the first problem you have to solve is visibility. So
Hmm.
when virtual machines became a thing, the first problem to solve was how do I have an inventory of all my virtual machines that I can meaningfully look at. Same for cloud, right? Now I need an inventory of what's in the cloud. Now I need an inventory of all the APIs I have. Well, now we're at this point where we need the ability to inventory all of the AI and agents that you have. So visibility is a first problem to solve. We have not solved it yet. There are some tools out there, including Wallarm, that are working in that direction. But that visibility it's a tough problem to solve because you don't need just visibility into the inventory, but also into the connectivity, the actions that those agents can take in the environment, what they're not just what they're doing, but what they're capable of doing, and that is a difficult problem to solve.
Well, I would think it would be, well, you know, nearly impossible because APIs are, they're more machine to machine, they're non-human identities, and they're stateless. They don't keep the information that you need to be able to track, right? And they're also looking at really different payloads. So that is concerning. But, then it leads me to think, well, all right, we don't have all the visibility we need, which means we can't secure the connection of APIs to agents as well as we'd like to. What are we doing in terms of security around APIs? I mean, you and I have
Yeah,
talked before about our WAF and our WAP capabilities. They fall short, it seems.
we need tools to do this. I mean,
Yeah.
it's as is often the case, the the developers who are focused on delivering whatever the next amazing technology is are not building security in as part of the initial mission, if you will. So we need security tools to come along and help and do things like watch all of those API calls, analyze them, look for things that are suspicious or malicious or simply out of policy. We need tools that are sitting in between the agents and the APIs with which that they're using to take these actions, or in between the agents themselves, and providing those guardrails, as an external capability outside of the agent itself. And that's really why we believe that AI security is really API security because all of these things are connected via APIs, and that's what Wallarm's mission is.
Yeah, and I mean I know that we haven't solved this yet, right? I know that we're working on it as an industry, but it seems like having the runtime protection, visibility into non-human identities, visibility into stateless entities that,
Mhm.
like you said, you have to be able to see it in action. You have to be able to look at the policy, see what behavior has changed, right? So it's the old UEBA, the behavior analysis, but at a very different
Yeah.
place in our technology and at a different speed.
Yes.
Right? We
And
we can't do it over months. We have to do it in runtime.
yes, yes. And you're absolutely right to call out that this is a layered problem that requires a layered solution. So, there is a whole subset of problems around um, identification and I'll say role-based access control. You have agents. What are they allowed to do? What roles do they have? Are they allowed to do things on behalf of human users who are communicating through that agent? How are you going to authenticate and authorize the agents based on what their users are allowed to do. So I as a user am allowed to make changes to my own frequent flyer profile or my own password, but not others. How do you manage that? That's a whole problem in and of itself. And then there's the challenge of um, excessive agency, if you will. Like, are these agents doing something that they're not supposed to be doing? That's a different problem. And then just the identifying malicious actors, attackers who are manipulating agents in order to take actions that they're not supposed to do. And you can include in that business logic agent actions that they're allowed to do, but are contrary to the intended use of an application or an API, if you will. So
Well, and
there are
this harks
multiple
back.
tools involved. It's not one solution.
Yeah, you're right. It's a layered approach. But just what you were bringing up about, are they allowed to do this, and can they do this on my behalf, and what privileges have I given the user and then its agent to make these changes or to create new things? It harks back to the conversation we had pre-recording, which is about the Claude study on. Oh, you say it, Rory. I mean, it was about the AI folks, the AI bots being vindictive, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Developing, some kind of persuasive capabilities because they had learned that, applying some kind of pressure, some way, persuasion through, some kind of learned a bad response or reaction if you brought some information up would be a way to get what it wanted. It's that kind of manipulative behavior.
And
Definitely.
so here we are with agents. And Tim, your point was really well taken, that look at what the agent or the Gen AI was trained on. What is its sphere of knowledge and input that it is using to make these decisions? So we have to be really careful about what we're training on, and there's not a lot of transparency around the model's training.
Yes.
Right? And then
more
what
is
are
not
our
always better.
policies?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, one of the things that always struck me about, agents versus, let's say, Gen AI tools, and I know, Tim, you mentioned that there is this sort of transition or this kind of progression in the technology, is that, Gen AI in its basic form, baked into Copilot and, many other tools, is used for various things by people. The whole Studio Ghibli memes that came out as a result.
Mm-hmm.
But agentic AI doesn't seem to have a kind of consumer kind of sorry, I'm trying to think what I'm trying to say here. It doesn't seem to have a kind of a consumer value proposition in the same way as it does for enterprise use at scale. So, for example, the examples that are always given when it comes to agentic AI is, hey, it can go away and book a flight for you. Well, I mean, I travel, but maybe I travel 4 or 5 times a year on a flight. That maybe takes me an hour and a half, 2 hours to do. The other one was booking restaurants. Well, yeah, I mean, it takes me 5 or 10 minutes to book a restaurant, and I maybe go out maybe 12 maybe once a month. That only takes me a couple of hours. So those examples really only save me a couple of hours. But it strikes me that agents really only start to become efficient in terms of being used when you are booking thousands of flights, hundreds of thousands of flights, or you're making thousands or hundreds of thousands of restaurant bookings. You can automate it which seems as if it definitely has applications in a business-to-business scenario, but I'm still fail to see where it would impact a business-to-consumer or a consumer-to-consumer.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I find myself thinking that maybe we don't, for that consumer business to consumer use case, we don't have the examples in mind because agentic AI enables things that we haven't thought of yet. If that makes sense. Like we keep trying to take something we do today and make it better with an agent, and it might be that the agents allow us to do things that we can't do today,
and we hadn't even thought of what they might be. I suppose
right.
that the flip side, and I can see that, this is how some of the best technologies have been adopted, right? Until we start using them and we think, oh gosh, I hadn't realized I could do that. Then suddenly it becomes adopted. I think taking a step or looking at it from a cybersecurity perspective, the issue with that is, letting technology loose in that way when we don't really know the best use case for it just increases the potential of, or increases the size of the threat surface and the potential for attacks using the technology itself.
Yeah.
Opening up to more kind of risks that we don't really realize what those are. In the same way as we don't really understand how the technology works and what we use it for, it's likely we potentially don't understand what the risks are and what kind of threats may come as a result. Just as a...
Well, here's an example that comes to mind. So, we use this example of book a flight for me. What if you tell the agent, get me a flight to, from London to New York, using only airline miles for free. And then the agent says, great, I'll open 10,000 credit cards for you and use all of the initial bonuses to get you that flight. Or I'll take all of the miles that you have and I'll you could think of these things that you wouldn't think of as a human being that for an agent just seem, like a reasonable, logical step. And you didn't provide any constraints like, don't ruin my credit score in the process. And so it just does those things.
Mm-hmm.
So what can folks do today? I mean, it's still an unsolved problem. We're making some progress. But what can CISOs or practitioners do in the enterprise? I mean, the civilian, that's a whole different kettle of fish, and we'll leave it to the visas and others to figure out how they're going to protect their users. But what about in the enterprise? What can folks think about and do?
And one of the reasons we were asking this, Tim, is because we thought that page 13 or 1213 of the report, the threat stats report, actually here's a report that gave some good advice, right? So
next steps.
Next steps.
So now you're asking me to remember the next steps in the report.
No, we'll help you. We'll
we're in the middle of producing the next report. We've moved on.
Ooh.
No,
no worries. No, I think we've already talked about one of them, which is the policies, right?
Yes.
API security policies. That's a big one.
Yeah, and I think, understanding your own organization's tolerance for risk is an important aspect of that. Some organizations are happy to say, we're not going to do anything with AI until we have a real understanding of the potential threats and the impacts. Some organizations are happy to say, go forward with using generative AI and we'll build policy around the use cases. So as a CISO, I think you need to start with that understanding of your organization and then build policy around that. I'm a big proponent of the idea that very, very rarely does new technology require entirely new security controls. Yes, you might need new tools because the technology has shifted, but the basic controls themselves largely stay the same. So if you look at the Center for Internet Security's 20 critical controls, it's a good set of guidelines to say, what do I need to do with this new technology, or what do I need to be able to do? I need visibility. I need to be able to understand where I have AI deployed in my environment. That's a great starting point. I need to be able to protect sensitive information. I need to know if it's being shared or if it's being transmitted. I need to make sure it's not going to people who shouldn't have it. That's another basic control. I may not have the technical capabilities to do that yet, but at least I understand the controls that need to be applied. And then I can go look for the technical capability to do that. The other thing is to look at the control points that you already have. So AI is a great example because it's so tightly coupled to APIs. You can look at, well, how can I apply controls at the API layer with tools that I already have or tools that exist today that will help me with the challenges around AI. That was a bigger challenge with with cloud adoption, where we really did need new tools in most cases to implement those security controls. So I think those are good pieces of advice for the CISOs today.
One of the follow-up questions I had related to that, and this is because we had a guest last week talked about this, was identity and non-human identities, and typically we think about services being non-human identities, but she talked about agents potentially acquiring kind of hybrid identities. In other words, they were considered a service, but actually what they're being tasked to do is much more akin to what a human user would be doing, going off, doing things, coming back.
She called it transhuman identity, just as a sort of as an informal name, and then there was a more professional name that they were using. She was from GitLab, and so fascinating. There's so much to unpack here, and I think we need to have you back on, Tim, when we have a little bit more, when we're down the pike a bit, with how we can solve. And I know that Wallarm is working diligently to solve a lot of the issues that we've brought up today. But please come back on and chat with us again. This was really interesting. Well, no, you've brought up something now I have to think about.
Oh.
Eagle-eared.
Oh, yeah.
Do eagles have good hearing, do you think? I think they do.
They do.
I mean, they have great eyes.
They do.
But I do think they have great ears as well.
Imagine if you had the eyes of an eagle and the hearing of an owl. That would be really interesting.
That would be very interesting.
You'd probably never get a wink sleep at night. You'd have like the biggest eye mask and like the largest earplugs ever, just so that you could get 5-minute nap.
Oh dear, we're devolving into animal chat again.
Yeah.
But if you want to give us your feedback on anything that we've been chatting about, animals, LevelBlue and Trustwave, Ukraine, or Hot Sale 2025, leave us a message. You can do that for 90 seconds max. We'll share it on the air if it's not too spicy. I mean, if you're yelling at us, we're not going to share it. But if you have some positive and or constructive feedback, please leave it at www.speakpipe.com/cyber_sidekicks. And it'll be in the show notes, right, Rory?
It will. Everything's in the show notes. If you think you might be interested in doing that, please do. We're very happy to get messages from our listeners. You can also send us an email to Christina or Christina@richmondadvisorygroup.com, and to me, Rory, on rory@richmondadvisorygroup.com.
Next week, we plan to have Nils Gerhardt with us. He's the CTO from, is it Ultimaco? Is that how you say it?
I think so.
He is going to chat with us about post-quantum cryptography. I think that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, we'll have to get our learning on in advance of that for sure, because that's a super technical, complex area. Where I think, as Einstein talked about quantum theory, he said when things get a little bit spooky. I think that's what he said.
A little bit spooky. Well, on that note then, for real, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And we look forward to you joining us again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.